Welcome to yet another lesson. We'll cover precision approach here. The topic will be connecting with many of the previous lessons, and that's the intent. That please bring questions, and then we'll be going in a large circle of topics. Every topic has a lot of connection points with others, and at some moment, this will click into a one solid picture of what we are doing. So today, well, first of all, disclaimer, if you're watching this online, this is not a training material. Please talk to your CFII or CFI. And otherwise, use this for your entertainment purposes. And if it brings any value, I'm so happy. As usual, looking at precision approach, when you are going for the check ride prep, check in with ACS. We have knowledge areas, we have risk management, and then most important on the next page, we have skills. Knowledge areas, you have to know what stabilized approach is. That is why precision approaches exist. Navigation systems that are used, what's the difference between ground-based, satellite-based, how we use those systems, what we expect to see, and how we interpret that information, and then the skill of flying, procedures, descent rates, and I'll go cover as much as we can today on the knowledge, but also here are the skills. Now, some of my personal color coding here, the brownish color, that's what I would sort of see as the more instrument related, something that as a private pilot you probably haven't seen, haven't experienced. And then on the easier side, the blue is what should be there for you from the private pilot days. So instrument flying builds on top of the private pilot, doesn't replace it all. Complete checklists, yeah, always do complete checklists as you fly. At the end of approach procedure, there is the normal landing. So when you're coming in for landing, if you were told that you have runway in sight, you have to be in that position to land. You have to maintain the stabilized visual flight path. So one of my personal shameful moments on a instrument check ride was that I was flying below visual glide slope. Wasn't failed for that, but I was told to do better next time. So when you fly instruments, don't forget all your skills from the private pilot days. Using MFD for situational awareness, I don't know how many years ago they added this, but assume this wasn't in PTS 10, 15 years ago, but they expect you to, if installed, to monitor where you are on the map, track wind, G3X at least in our planes, G1000, they give you the wind details and maintain situational awareness. SRM and CRM, obviously, as needed. Alex, question. I can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Quick question. MFD in this sense, does it actually refer to the second display, like you have a primary, you have a secondary, or does it generally refer to any?
Good question. The MFD is a multifunction display. It depends on your setup. If you are thinking about a G5 plus 650, the G5, well, arguably, but that would be your primary display with your attitude up top, HSI down below. The 650, that's a multifunction. You can bring up moving map, traffic, terrain, whatever information that can help.
And if we have a setup like in the RVs, the two G3Xs.
Right, RV12, double G3X, your left side has your flight instruments, attitude, airspeed, altitude, navigation. That's primary PFD. On the right side, multifunction display. Probably get a combination of moving map and traffic or engine instruments, whatever fits and the flight stage and helps you to have that situational awareness.
Okay, so it has to be used.
Yeah, if you have it, if installed, the DPE will expect you to use it, and he'll probably even question you on the features. How do you get weather? Have you in RV12, Alex? Have you ever gotten next-red weather on a MFD?
No, I don't think so.
That will be part of expectation. So yeah, you are expected to use all available resources,
Mhm.
which is probably in some regard makes flying on a six-pack a little easier. But I think if we are serious about airlines, get in, be comfortable with all those tools sooner, even if you don't have airlines in mind. That's okay. Okay, now a couple of words before we jump into the main meat. How the instrument flight will be evaluated. You have to maintain that altitude as cleared plus minus 100 feet. If you are given a heading, plus minus 10 degrees. If you're flying an approach and you flying that with 80 knots, you're expected to be plus minus 10. Although you hardly ever will be given a firm speed to fly, your speed has to be stable. You have to fly purposeful speed, intentional speed that you've chosen. The big deal is about three-quarter deflection. When you are in approach and you deflect more than three-quarters needle, you have to go missed, or if you don't recognize that, that's a failure. When you're tracking radials, courses, bearings, all that time, the needle deflection is critical. So that's probably your main challenge on an instrument check ride. DH, decision altitudes, or well, for precision approach, decision altitude. We don't use decision height. See how it says account for NOTAMs. It is so easy to overlook a NOTAM that says amend decision altitude for an approach, or even that says that certain approach minimum is not even authorized. We had that in Toledo airport just the prior week within my lesson. NOTAMs, big deal. They often alter the way you fly an approach, including they alter the missed approach procedure. Hockbeam, as of last week, had alternate missed approach depicted in NOTAMs versus what's published. So big deal. Check that. When you are descending on a precision glide path, you have to be on your needles, on your glide path, and knowing configuration of an airplane plus adjusting that for the wind helps a lot. So you set an intentional power setting when you get on that glide slope, and obviously then later you adjust, but definitely helps to know where you're going to. In the final approach fix, that's where the most critical path of the flight hits. Can't deflect more than three-quarters, obviously lateral or vertical, and you have to be on that desired airspeed. So again, you will not be given an airspeed, but you have to show that you're flying a desired airspeed. You can't be all over the map from 60 to 90. And definitely where one could fail, where people do fail, is you have to go missed approach at the decision altitude. And this is where we're starting to get into the meat of precision approach. Decision altitude is exactly what it sounds. That is where you decide that you do not have visual on the runway, you're going missed. That means that certain descent below that altitude is normal and expected. You don't have to buffer that, and you will not be punished for a slight reasonable descent below the DA, as long as you initiate that sequence immediately at decision altitude. So count down to decision altitude, pitch up, throttle full, and then rest of the motions starting right at decision altitude. So those are the skills, and I should be able to cover a lot to fill this in the next 60 some minutes. Okay, so instrument approach and specifically precision approach today. First of all, what is an approach? Approach is a way for you to get from en route structure, from you flying above MEAs, get down through the weather to a position where a visual landing can be made. Unless you are in airlines and a Cat 3C approach, you have to be able to make the visual landing at the end of every approach. Now, precision approach, the formal firm definition is approach with approved vertical guidance and approach that meets that ICAO Annex 10 standards. And they're pretty specific technical descriptions, but what it comes down to in the full firm definition of the precision approach per FAA until at least recent, it is only the ILS because it is a ground-based navigation and it's there on the ground and reliably showing you the glide path and course. The ground augmented GPS system, the GLS, which is really proprietary and we can't use it. Very important that precision approaches use decision altitude, not MDA. Now, the second portion here is the approach with vertical guidance. This is sitting as a little bit aside from precision approaches, but the APVs use decision altitude as well. Mostly for us flying and training here, we're looking at LPV approach, which, as the AIM describes, which is built to mimic exactly the ILS approach. AIM has that exact wording that it has the same properties and I believe even slightly more precise than ILS. And the transition for people from ILS to LPV should be seamless. LNAF VNAF is a little harder to find, so LPV would probably be your primary.
So is this GPS based?
The LPV and LNAF are GPS based approaches, yes. And I would just probably propose that FAA is somewhat slow to update. ILS goes back decades. GPS has become precise only, well, in the last couple decades, less. It's much younger, much newer technology. And the WAS, the augmentation system that made LPV that precise, has been launched, well, again, I don't have a date, sorry, but rather recent. Yes, so GPS is mostly what you'll have for those APV approaches. In fact, I do not believe there's any non-GPS signal that non-GPS approach that falls in APV. But again, DA, decision altitude, think of that as a precision approach with an approved vertical guidance. Now, so when we're navigating below the weather, the pilot is the one responsible. Once you are on an approach chart, you are the one responsible for navigation and staying clear of trouble. Precision approach, just to hammer this firmly, you have course and glide path deviation, which is what makes it precise. And ILS, just like LPV approach, the sensitivity will increase as you get closer to the point, and GLS and PR are really not in today's topic. Now, a couple other details for the precision approach to be enabled. Runway has to have approach lighting system, or ALS, which can be anywhere from 2,400 feet to 3,000 feet long. So lights and markings on the runway are just as important piece of the puzzle as the signals themselves that drive you to the runway. And Checkride specifically allows use of those LPV approaches to satisfy the requirement to fly a precision approach. And that's interestingly worded in that Appendix 3 in ACS. And that's where FAA is starting to call LPV approaches a precision. if slightly outside of today's topic, but if you'll get to that comment, you'll realize, you'll see what I mean. But for now, we'll keep them separate. LPV is approach with vertical guidance. ILS is a precision approach. Both have decision altitude and very similar sensitivity scaling. Quick reminder on what the GPS system with augmentation is. We have GPS satellites. That's a separate constellation that rotates around the Earth. Then we have receiver on the ground that receives the GPS signal from the satellites and calculates if there is an error, because the receiving point on the ground knows exactly where it is at, and the calculated position, if that is different, then the needed correction is calculated and sent back to a different communication satellite that also transmits a signal. So this little yellow arrow in red is received in parallel with a standard GPS signal, and the WAS-equipped GPS has to receive both and interpret the signal from both. That is called a space-based augmentation and goes by WAS, the Wide Area Augmentation System. So one of the questions you'll definitely get is, what's the GPS, what's WAS, and how those two are related. You have to be able to explain the picture and make sense of this. Somewhat of a technical, nerdy deep dive, but if you guys have questions, please throw this in. Otherwise, it'll 5 seconds. We'll continue.
Is WAS truly required right now? The GPS has gotten way better in the latter years.
It is a must-have requirement for LPV approach. One of the ways to make GPS receiver fall down below LPV, fall down to a LNAV only approach, is to disable WAS manually. So you go in the menu, you disable WAS functionality. GPS receiver will not provide you LPV guidance. So yes, GPS is pretty accurate, but WAS makes that like an order of magnitude more accurate than just a pure basic GPS. Okay, so now let's go on approach plate. Each approach plate has several areas which have their own names, and they serve different purpose and distill differently. We are looking at FAA plates. They are more available, although in commercial aviation, Jeppesen is the format of choice. We focus on FAA today. Briefing section, notes, details, frequencies, plan view, looking from tops down, and this plan view is drawn to scale. Then a profile view, not drawn to scale, but that gives you a quick view on waypoints, altitude restrictions, and descriptions. Then minimums down below, and that's where you are looking at the minimums that you can fly this approach to, and often there are multiple options. So the briefing section itself, airport, obviously make sure you get the correct plate on your hands. Nav 8 frequency, if you are looking at ILS, the frequency is in the top left corner, and this is one of moments where I ask you to please memorize it and use it. Source Morse course. As you brief the plate, you put the frequency in a receiver, you confirm that it's the right frequency, you listen to the Morse code, and you verify that the course is set correctly. Now, it's not as critical for ILS, it's more for VOR, but if you have loaded a correct approach and loaded it properly, the 650, for example, it will set the course automatically. And if you see it's matching what you expect, that's just one more check to confirm that you are loading the correct approach. So that's the course. Landing runway info, you just know that it's large runway. Would those numbers be really critical for you when you fly? Probably not, but confirm what you have on hands and it's matching your airplane. Applicable notes. Sometimes there are a lot of those notes. What I do in ForeFlight, when I brief, I highlight what's applicable. In this case, circling to a shorter runway, not authorized at night. Well, let's say we weren't planning to use that. Inop table doesn't apply to a straight localizer. Good to know on 1.3 right. For Inop ALS, we increase GK minimums, but those, as we see later, well, and it only applies to category C and D. So some things are just not applicable, and if you weed out what's not, then the nodes portion becomes simpler. Available ALS, this one is important. We have Mulser, and that tells you what to expect when you get close to the runway. Also, because it is black on white, that means it's pilot controlled. So you get close to airport, don't forget to click the mic. And then this is one of the items that will really help when you get close and you are in the weather. Communication frequencies, if you have dual radios, would be nice to put them in the moment you brief the approach in the air, and that just saves you some time later. Note the alternate takeoff minimums and alternate airport minimums. If they exist, that could tell you that this airport is not plain and simple kind of everything is flat in Kansas situation. But specifically for flying approach, those will not impact how you fly that. Now, next, plan view section. By now, you would have the localizer frequency already loaded, so there are a lot of items that that repeat themselves. Approach course obviously depicted, and that's loaded. But then you go on to briefing an approach itself. You have initial approach fix. You go in and verify that your GPS database loaded the correct approach and altitudes names are matching. IF fix, DACA in this case. Again, you have altitude, and at this moment you're looking at the plan view only, so you have just the name. Final approach fix. One of the ways to brief this would be you bring a map view on a 650. You look at the plan view, and they should match. So that means you have a correct plate that matches the map. Other things, altitudes, courses, distances, missed approach procedure. See that dashed line. That is often one of the questions on the check ride. Well, why is this portion showing in dashed and this hold here as well? The dashed line would be your missed approach segment of the approach. And MSA. Is that going to come in play unless emergency? Probably not. If there is something really abnormal, like in this case, you see much lower MSA in a southeastern segment versus the western. So quick look at this tells you, well, there's probably some mountains and hills on the west side, just for the general awareness. And that's for the plan view. Oh yeah, couple words on minimal safe altitude. We're looking at the numbers that give you 1,000-foot obstacle clearance, and it's no different for mountains or non-mountainous terrain. Majority of other IFR altitudes, they differ. MEAs, they give you more clearance, 2,000 feet in all the western portion. MSA is the only one actually probably circling also doesn't change. So little interesting nerdy detail here. MSA is given around a particular navigated or a waypoint, and the name would be right in the title. So in this case, PND, that's the non-directional beacon. I don't know if it's even alive, but that's a waypoint. Oh yes, and another thing, the sectors on that MSA chart are depicted by the heading to navigate, not from. So being in a sector, you have to know what's your heading to the navigate and then put it between the two numbers on the chart. Probably already spent more than MSA demands, but at least you know it, how to use it. Next, profile view. By now, you really looked through all the names. The only thing that's remaining is confirm that altitude restrictions depicted match the 650 or the GPS you're using, and double check on the missed approach instructions. This whole section is very simplified visual view. The full missed approach the instructions are in the notes, but if you're needing just a quick and simple reminder what you're doing, then you'll be looking in the profile view. What else? Beginning of the missed approach. One of the very common typical questions would be looking at this plate. Where is a missed approach point? And the answer would be the missed approach is initiated at decision altitude of whatever's on the next slide. It is not a waypoint by itself. And what else? Glide slope is 3 degrees. So throughout the whole brief, if you're looking at unfamiliar approach, look for something that's non-standard. 3 degrees is the standard glide slope. Some approaches have much steeper, and if you see anything that's non-ordinary, expect this could be a challenging or at least a different approach from standard. Alex.
Dmitry, you mentioned that your missed approach should be made at the decision altitude. Is that, do you have to wait for the decision altitude? Can you make it earlier, or
good question?
What happens if you make it later?
We go back to this page. You have to initiate missed approach when at decision altitude, but if you have a reason to initiate that sooner, for example, if you're getting a three-quarter scale deflection, that could be your way to save you from failing. If for whatever reason you deviated three-quarter scale, you have to declare and go missed. There could be other reasons. In the real world, equipment malfunction, you lost signal, or you got tower to tell you to go missed. You're always able and welcome to go missed. However, there is one very critical detail, and it is in the aim. I don't think I have it handy, but when you are on, let's look at the plan view. When you are on the approach course and you are going towards the runway, you can start climbing at any moment, but you cannot start turning before you hit the threshold of the runway. That's specifically in the aim. So what this means, scene instructions say you climb direct up to 1,000 feet, and then you turn direct U-berg, aiming for altitude of 3,000. Well, what if you go missed right after the final approach fix? You'd be above 1,000 feet, and you'll be climbing. You may reach 3,000 feet even before the threshold. If you start any turns before you cross that threshold, that will be a fail.
Okay, and that's the further threshold or the closest threshold?
The closest one.
Closest. Okay.
What is called? It's not the departure end of the runway. It's blanking on the name.
The approach end?
I guess approach end of the runway, right? Yeah. That concept is super important, and you'll expect to be tricked on oral or on a check ride. Whatever happens, you fly straight to that approach end of the runway before you make any turns. Yep. Alex.
How do you know that you cross the threshold if you don't have visibility?
That's a great question. So, in our real-world airplanes, we will use GPS to bring up approach and use those waypoints. So you'll see a waypoint called the missed approach point map for the runway. It will be named typically something like map RW13. So if your GPS is with you and functional, you will see that countdown to the missed approach point, and you know when you cross that using GPS. In other cases, if, say, you're trying to fly this approach, and let me see if I have a full plate. Nope, I don't. Okay. The question you asked is a very important and critical. And like this is what I was looking for. If you're flying with a conventional, meaning no GPS, a VOR, DME, or ILS system, they give you this table at the bottom of airport chart. That gives you the final approach fix to the missed approach point, distance, and the time. At this moment, you will have to know your ground speed, and crossing the final approach fix, you'd have to set the timer. And when the timer expires, that's when you cross the missed approach point. That's how people used to fly those approaches. And yeah, the final approach fix, in this case, we are looking at DOLA. So the DOLA intersection is identified in that case by intersection of ILS signal, the localizer, and the battleground radial 235. But I don't believe they would ever give you such way to identify the missed approach point, because when you're that close and that low and don't see the ground, the last thing you want to do is look at the second radial. Let me make sure I don't get you too confused. So when you're flying on ILS on the glide slope, your missed approach initiation happens at decision altitude. But if you initiated that earlier, then you using GPS, and in absence of GPS, in this case, you would use the timer.
Okay, and then the last question is, if I have to go around after the decision altitude, say, unstable, something like a wind shear blew me off, do I declare missed approach and do the same procedure?
While going on the final approach segment, or
below the decision altitude? So let's say I was coming in fine, and then the low wind shear blew me off.
That's a possibility, and this would be in 91-175. So that's another moment where I hope that you'll memorize this 91-175 Charlie almost word to word. And what you're asking is, are you in a position to land using normal flight maneuvers? If something wind shear or otherwise got you unstable, and now the only way to land is to start fighting this, that would not qualify for a stabilized approach, and you'd probably be required to go climb because you're no longer in that position. So that's how I would tie this to the regulations. But in a common sense world, if you are unable to continue safely landing, even being below decision altitude, going missed is always a great idea. It's there was a meme that says it's better for you to explain why you did go missed than for NTSB to find out why you didn't. Make sense?
Yeah, like there's a deer on the runway, right?
For example,
For
right?
example,
Yeah. You got sight of the runway, it's uncontrolled airport, and the last moment, runway is not suitable for landing, you go missed. Absolutely. Free to go missed before or after DA. But 91.175 specifically says when you are okay to descend below the decision altitude. And those three are important. You have to be in position to land using normal flight maneuvers. It's a given on a precision approach, but still, flight visibility has to be no less than prescribed, and those visual references have to be clearly identifiable. And we'll circle back to this, but that's 91.175 is super important. Okay, a couple more approach plate details. So ILS approach plate has a airport layout section. It's a tiny little square, but surprisingly packs a lot. Do you have to brief all this going through every detail? Probably not, but a few things that would really matter. Approaching 1 through left, we have Mulser, pilot controlled. The course is aligned with runway, that's great. When we get out of the clouds, puppies will be on our left. And by the way, if we see them on our right, we're probably on the wrong runway. 1-3 left would have that puppy on the wrong side for us. Rails not on the runway that we're landing, so if somehow we see those flashing strobes, it's a wrong runway again. High intensity runway lights available on the 1-3 right. That's good, so we know that we have them. So all kinds of light equipment is all in this chart. Other than that, there's a lot of dimensions and numbers and etc. Really good, quick, nice reference for what do we have for the runways. Now, probably on to the most important, minimum section. So approach plate is called ILS/localizer because that is the equipment that you require to have to fly the final approach segment. But in the minimums, now we have aircraft categories. A is VREF up to 90 knots, and B is 90 to 120, I believe. If for some reason you chose to fly Cessna with a more than 90 knots approach speed, you have to follow the minimums for the category B. And for example, for the localizer, you'd have higher visibility. For the circling, you'd have a higher MDA. For the straight-in ILS, there's no change, so that's good. Now,
where are those categories defined?
that would be in the AIM. I don't remember the exact page number, but I'll keep reminding you all, I really have to read the AIM. It seems boring at first, but once you finish it, actually it turns out to be a good read, so it's all there.
Okay.
Yeah. What else? The key elements on the minimum section. I'll switch to this slide. DA for the straight-in. Some plates will call out if it's DA or MDA, but otherwise it's pretty simple. The ILS and the LPV for us will be the decision altitude. Decision altitude is in the larger bold numbers, and that's an MSL. So this tells you that you are approaching a runway at 200 feet AGL. The number with a slash, that's your RVR minimums, which will translate to a flight visibility. And the numbers in brackets in down at the very end of the line for us mean nothing. If you look in the legend for the plate, they will say that those are for military use only, and then next line it says military pilots use their own stuff anyway. So sometimes those numbers may look like they mean something, and you'll be probably asked, what do they mean? And the answer should be, those are not for civil pilots use, and we're not looking at them. So decision altitude, followed by visibility requirements, are specifically RVR and decision height. RVR versus flight visibility. The numbers with that follow the slash, those are runway visual range requirements. Those can be reported in airports if they have equipment. Hillsborough will do that if visibility is low. The numbers that follow after a dash, that's just a flight visibility. And that's another question that you'll have to be really comfortable and firm with. I was personally tricked into that. The question was kind of like as follows. You are approaching a towered airport in your little Cessna. You have visibility requirement, let's say in this case, 1.25 miles. You decided to do localizer, and the tower says, Cessna 123, Foxtrot Alpha, visibility on the ground is 1/4 mile, say intentions. And the answer would be firm and simple. Thank you. We have flight visibility that is more than required, and we're proceeding to land. So flight visibility is what is called out in the 91-175, and that is determined by you as the pilot looking outside, using references, using whatever you can use, but flight visibility, not the ground visibility, is what matters for this case. Okay, focusing on the precision approach only. In this plate, we have only one line for the minimums, the straight in ILS, decision altitude, the runway visual range requirement, which will translate to flight visibility, and decision height. That's it. Seems like a simple concept, but I'll reiterate once again. Decision altitude example is you are descending on a glide path. When you hit that altitude on the altimeter, you make a decision. Either you continue to land if requirements are met, or you initiate missed approach. You do not level off. The minimal descent altitude for the non-precision approach would be different. You level off at the MDA. ACS calls for at or above 100 feet. So never deep down below MDA, and that would be a fail. And at that altitude, you proceed to the missed approach point, which for the non-precision approach is an actual waypoint at which you either proceed to land. You can proceed to land before if you have the runway in sight, or you go missed. The key difference in DA versus MDA is this level off and fly level segment that does not exist with precision approaches. Okay, now I'll skip the circling minimums for now. That's really a topic for a whole separate lesson. Once again, 91-175, you need to be able to give those 3 bullets, like they say, you woken up in the middle of the night and you remember them. If you don't remember 91-175, don't go to the check ride, please. Now, the visible elements are paint, pavement, or lights. That's how easy to remember that. I hope that you'll be able to count all those 10 visual references, but at least you know the groups. It's either paint on the surface or the pavement itself. Obviously, you see the pavement, great. Or the lights, and lights can be in various places, edge, ends, threshold, everything. Rails, VASIS, ALS, all count. And then we come to one very important detail about the ALS. This one here. So if out of all those possible lights surrounding the runway, the only thing you see is the approach lighting system, and you don't see the red terminating bars, then in this case, you are allowed to descend to 100 feet above touchdown zone elevation. To simplify this, basically another 100 feet from where decision altitude is, but the specific wording is that 100 feet above touchdown zone elevation. And that creates almost a secondary decision altitude for the precision approach when you either see remaining visual references or you have to go missed if you still see nothing else. There, I'll let this sink in for a second, see if it actually makes sense or any questions.
So you're saying in the previous example, you're allowed to go to 300 feet. Our DA was 403 and the DH is 3. So if you see the green bar, you basically go to 300 until you see something else.
No, wait. Let me make sure I hear you correctly. The decision altitude in this plate for Hillsboro is 403.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Right.
That's right. I'm confused. So yeah, so you can 403 is the decision altitude, but you can go to 300.
Yes, which would be touchdown zone elevation, this number here, and a couple other places, plus 100 feet, which exactly happens to, and is it always exactly like that? I would think, but specific wording is touchdown zone elevation plus 100 feet. In this case, you're right. You can descend to a 303 feet MSL, at which moment you have to go check, do you see those paint, pavement, or lights, or the red terminating bars. And what those are, oh, this is a good picture. So this is one of the approach lighting systems. See how it has the red bars at the very end? That means you are almost at the threshold. But all the other either strobes like the rabbit or the yellowish or white lights, they are those non-red elements of the ALS. You see the yellow parts of ALS, you can descend that extra 100 feet. Once you see the red lights and you hopefully see the green lights, then you're clear to land. You see that? That's great. That you have it. Now, hopefully none of us, you like here, will be flying in those kind of minimums. We'll talk about the personal minimums later. But when you're that close, 100 feet to the ground and going 90, that takes practice and some balls to do this all correctly and stay in one piece. However, 91 175, please be able to quote that exactly and understand what it means and how to use it.
So I have a question. So let's say hypothetically we have an ILS setup that only takes us down to about 300 feet above ground level.
Okay.
If we get one of the runway lights in sight, can we then descend an additional 200 feet, or does it only permit an additional 100 feet of descent?
The way you asked that just now, if we have runway lights, you can go land.
Okay.
If you meant to ask if you only see the yellow portion of ALS,
yes, that's the one. That's what I meant.
Then you descend to 100 feet above touchdown zone elevation. That portion is crystal clear. So if in your example somehow the decision altitude is 300 feet AGL, you'll be descending 200 feet more because now you're authorized to get down to a 100 feet above touchdown zone elevation.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, so in that case, if somebody simply remembers, oh, it's another 100 feet, you can put yourself in a wrong answer if you say that. So again, 100 feet above touchdown elevation, that's your next decision altitude.
Okay.
Okay, so paint, pavement, and markers, paint, pavement, or lights. Okay, what else? Let's polish this off with how to quickly brief an approach. Please practice that. There are a ton of videos on YouTube how with good and not so good examples, but out of all this, you are looking, especially when you're flying and you will be landing soon, you're looking to refresh yourself with how exactly are you expecting to fly this? What are your fixes? What are your key altitudes? Definitely what's your altitude that you will initiate your missed approach at. If you're flying ILS, decision altitude 403. If you have a backup option, say, well, if we get close to final approach fix and glide slope is not received, we agree we'll fly localizer. Then we have a different number to remember. And very important is the missed approach segment. The safe way to fly in the weather is expect every approach to lead into a missed approach segment and treat actual landing as a bonus. I have some limited, but still some IMC experience. It is very tempting to just keep going and see the runway finally, but you have to expect to go missed no lower than the decision altitude in this case. So brief what's important. And I think in airlines, they want the briefing to be done within a minute and a half, or there's some reasonably short amount of time. So reading line by line everything is not the briefing. It's more yourself familiarizing with a plate. But once you brief it, it has to be quick. Especially if you're flying airplane without autopilot. That takes a lot of skills to keep flying the needles and brief the approach at the same time. Now, once you brief that, once you're ready to fly an approach, I have a couple examples prepared on how this will actually work. One of mnemonics that people teach that seems to be helpful, the ABCs, airspeed and 80s. You get the weather, you slow down to an airspeeds that are reasonable. B, you build and brief that approach. You have it loaded in GPS and you briefed it. You know which waypoints you're expecting, which other waypoints exists, key altitudes, and the missed approach segment. And definitely C for checklists. Always do all those checklists, whether check ride or not. Now next, when you will be cleared for the approach, it is always given in the same format, PTAC. Position, turn, altitude, and the clearance. And I'll apply this to this scenario in a second. So let's say we're flying this approach, this 1-3 right, ILS, and we're coming in from Portland. We have requested a full approach with an arc from Duffy, and ATC was nice enough to give us that. Once they're ready to clear us, they will follow that PTAC example to give us the clearance. They'll say, November 726 Foxtrot Alpha, you are 5 miles east of Duffy. Proceed, direct Duffy, maintain 5,000 until established, clear ILS 13 Hillsborough. And they'll say it quick. However, if you remember that PTAC is the format, you don't have to read back the position. That's for your awareness. You have to read back and execute the turn or the heading, direction. You have to repeat back the altitude, and you have to read back the clearance. So the readback would be direct Duffy, maintain 5,000 until established, clear ILS 13 Hillsborough. The crisper and more compact you say that, the better. Now next, you get to the Duffy. If you're flying green needles, you'll be having fun with turn 10, twist 10, following the arc. Otherwise, you'll just follow the pink needles and fly the arc all the way to the position number 3. If you're still flying the green needles, the LR means a lead radial. That's when you start turning and intercepting the ILS course. At this moment, it is very advisable to switch to the green needles and start flying the localizer. And another very important thing to remember is no matter what, on a check ride, you have to be on green needles before the final approach fix. You get to the final approach fix, if you're still flying GPS on pink needles, that's an automatic fail. So definitely before final approach fix, but very advisable to just intercept the localizer once you are on the final approach course. Next, when you are on the final approach course, Covey would be another waypoint. The proper way would be to descend that 3,300 before Covey. Once you cross that, descend 2,900. So you follow the step down altitudes. And this little lightning bolt symbol, that shows you the glide slope intercept altitude. Many people would say that's a final approach fix, and I think I just did that a few times. But the correct nomenclature for this would be on an ILS approach. 2,900 is a glide slope intercept altitude. That's where no lower than or no later than we need to intercept the glide slope and fly glide slope plus localizer all the way to decision altitude. There. We're past 10, getting late. I'll save a couple other slides for other rounds.
I'm curious why all those plays keep referring to UVG, even though it's been offline for several years now and doesn't look like it's coming back.
I think that's just because it can still be used as a GPS waypoint, although using it as an actual VOR is not possible right now. So I think it's still just kept as the approach because you can use the GPS to get there.
But how do you use it as GPS? Is it marked somehow on the GPS?
I'm pretty sure you could just it depends on what instrument setup you have, but at least for us, you can enter it as a waypoint on the G1000. It's kind of G1000s are confusing, but you can enter it into the flight plan, and you can just use the wheels to twist in the actual code, and it will allow you to go direct to a VOR or anything like that. And you just select whichever nav you put it in.
It's just a waypoint.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is a waypoint in GPS. Dmitry, you're on mute.
Yeah, thanks for putting me on mute. I didn't realize walking away with a wireless microphone puts you in a interesting situation. Okay, so there you go. I think the question was about this approach and the waypoints in the database, right? Or because I didn't hear the question.
Yeah, because Newberg VOR has been offline as VOR, right?
Right.
So the question is, that point is still on the plates, and how is it being used?
Yeah.
System test okay.
So, first of all, if you look up the NOTAMs for this approach, it will say, the 1.3 right, it will say that approach is not authorized unless your airplane has that GPS RNAV system. And so it is expected you have that that capability. Second, all the VORs, they are A waypoints as well. So if you simply in GPS you punch in Newberg, direct to, there you go. I think Ryan, you called it right. So you can use that. You can use that waypoint as the waypoint. Now, if you go to a procedure approach, Hillsborough, and there is a 3113 right. ILS, there you go. ILS 13 right, and look at available transition points. One of them would be Newberg. Load and activate that. You get routed direct to Newberg. See down below you have there. You have a GPS. Right now you'd be following the GPS guidance being on the pink needles. And sure enough, it takes you right to the Newberg. So if I got the question correctly, yes, Newberg as a radio nav aid is offline, or at least unusable at the moment, but the waypoint is usable if you have GPS system.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay, so yeah, so that's how you load. Now, 650, again, often you'd build a flight plan. I'll just start from scratch. you add a waypoint, say you're coming from Toledo, then maybe you come to A6-B, and say you want to land in Hillsboro. It is very typical for somebody to load Hillsboro, then to go and load procedure from the airport, click approach, select the approach, either select vectors or a transition, and load that. Now, a little bit of a downside in this case is your path will take you all the way to Hillsboro and then back on the approach. Visualizing that on the map. Well, that's a bad example because it takes you to Hillsboro, and let's pick something else.
But it, I mean, it takes you to Hillsboro and then to Newburgh and then back to Hillsboro.
And even worse, right, back to Hillsboro and then to Dola. So that
I think your previous navigation is still active to Newburgh.
You know what? Yeah, let's delete this all over and come up with a better example. So how about PDX? And then if I would say Hillsboro, look in the map. Oh, I need to put my airplane somewhere here. There. That's better. Flight plan PDX, Hillsboro. Activate the leg. So now GPS will show us the way from PDX to Hillsboro. That's the pink line. Now, let's see what happens if we add an approach. Go in flight plan, click Hillsboro, load procedure, approach, ILS 13 right, and let's say we want a Duffy as a transition. That's the point that was on my slide. Load approach, and let's look at the map. So now the pink line still takes us to Hillsboro, and then from the airport to Duffy, and then the ARC, then DACA, and then the actual final approach course. In the real world, that's unlikely how you would fly that. You will be cleared direct Duffy, or somehow else you will be turned towards your initial approach fix, probably not overflying the airport. Each situation, how you would handle that could be slightly different. But the key thing to remember is if you went into the flight plan and you had your airport loaded, if you do nothing else, your GPS will take you to that airport first before taking you to the initial approach fix, Duffy in this case. You still with me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Okay, now another way to do that would be, let me just go back to flight plan, menu, delete, all clear. Let's say we are at PDX and we know we're flying to Hillsboro. If you go to the main menu without even putting Hillsboro in the flight plan, hit procedure, approach, you have to update airport here to what you need and then select an approach. By now, you maybe made a request or at least made a plan to have a full approach flown from Duffy. Select Duffy, load approach, and now you don't have this extra step of Hillsboro being between PDX and the Duffy itself. Looking on the map, makes a lot more sense. GPS will be sending you direct to Duffy and then on the approach. Doesn't mean that's exactly how you'll fly. You'll talk to ATC, but at least that's more logical. Okay, last one before I pause and see if this was useful. The missed, Ryan, was it you who asked about the missed approach point?
Yes,
Right.
for decision altitudes.
No. Okay. Well, there was a question. How do we identify the threshold of the runway? Not the missed approach point, but the threshold of the runway.
Yeah, I asked that question.
Yeah. Thank you, Alexei. So here is the thing. On a precision approach loaded, you see this one, the runway 13 right, and it says map, the missed approach point. Unless I'm really missing something, but this is the threshold of the runway 31 right. This is not your decision altitude at which you have to go missed. That this would be if you go back and fly the same plate using the localizer minimums. Where are they? Here. If you use the localizer minimums, then approach becomes non-precision, and the same nomenclature will be your missed approach point at the threshold of the runway, but not for the ILS. So 650, you have the map, which means not the map with cities and roads on it, but a missed approach point that is actually depicting the threshold of the runway for runway 13 right. Okay, I think we should call it done.
Sounds good. Thank you,
Right.
Dmitry.
Thank you, Dmitry. That was helpful.
Yeah, if you come up with any questions after we hang up, please shoot them my way. Otherwise, thanks for being here. And yeah, safe flights. Let's meet next week. Let's do more.
Thank you.
Bring questions. Cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.